What's up, guys? So here are my predictions for a UFC Fight Night happening in Wichita, Kansas. I believe that's how you pronounce it. And this is a pretty good card. I mean, after all the madness we got last week, this should be a pretty good card to just sit back, relax, and watch, and just have fun. And we're going to start with Anthony Rocco Martin versus Sergio Morais. This should be an excellent fight. I think this might be one of the best fights on the entire card. We have two great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighters who have developed their striking quite a bit over the years. Tony Martin is a lot more of a risk taker when it comes to BJJ, whereas Sergio Morais is a lot more methodical with his positioning. Tony Martin's usually trying to go for the submissions, usually looking for them, whereas Morais is looking for positions a lot more. And when that kind of battle happens, the guy who has better positioning usually dominates the ground game. Overall, Sergio Morais has better credentials than Tony Martin when it comes to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But the only problem is their takedowns aren't the best for both of them. Their means of getting it to the ground is pretty lacking to try to get their advantages going. So I actually do see this fight being more of a striking match, although for some reason I do see Morais taking it to the ground eventually. But on the feet, I would say Tony Martin is a much better striker. Much more technical, way more precise. Morais will throw wild shots and he loses composure a lot more than Tony Martin does. Martin has developed his boxing greatly. His footwork is excellent. His positioning on the feet is excellent. And the positioning itself on the feet, knowing which angles to stay at on Morais, is essentially going to be the biggest weapon or the hardest thing for Morais to get past. Because Morais kind of attacks forward, right? He would move around and stuff. He has pretty good movement until he attacks or until he defends. That's what I'm saying, that he loses composure pretty easily. And Tony Martin does not. I mean, we're talking about a madman in there. I mean, when you look at his fight with Jake Matthews, I mean, he was egging on Matthews to come at him, and he was winning the striking exchange until he got caught. I think it was more of an unbalanced issue. He threw the right hand a little bit too much and got caught with his feet unbalanced. But Tony Martin has an excellent straight right hand and one of the best check left hooks I've seen in this division. And that check left hook is going to be a huge weapon against Morais because Morais likes to throw haymakers, he likes to throw overhands, wing out punches, and if Martin could pull on the punch and land that check left hook, that should be an excellent countering weapon. So my prediction for this fight, I'm going to go with Tony Martin, although I do think it's a very close fight because I do think Sergio Morais will get it to the ground eventually. But the thing we know about Tony Martin is he is not afraid to go on the ground. I mean, he fought guys like Olivier Aubin-Mercier, and he was able to win that fight as well. A very dangerous Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighter. A little bit different than Sergio Morais, but it shows his confidence on the ground. So I'm going to stick with Tony Martin because he does have better striking. He has a pretty good takedown defensive game, and he is pretty capable on the ground himself. So I think there's just too much defense preventing Morais using his strength. And I think Tony Martin is going to win through a decision. And then we go to Blagoy Ivana versus Ben Rothwell. The return of Ben Rothwell. This is something a lot of people are excited for. And he's having, I don't want to say a tune-up fight because Ivanov has been tested. He fought JDS in his last fight. Did pretty well. I mean, he survived for 5 rounds. And he fought guys like Alexander Volkov back in the day. Although getting submitted by Volkov is not a great thing. Again, when it comes to layoffs and comebacks and stuff, that is a big X factor because we don't know how Ben Rothwell is going to appear. I mean, it's been 2 years about, and his last fight was also against JDS. But the first thing to take note is Ben Rothwell is enormous when he's going to be in there against Ivanov. I mean, he's going to have such a big size advantage, 5 inches taller, 5-inch reach advantage, and he cuts weight to 265, whereas Ivanov weighs about 250. And Rothwell does impose his size on his opponents. He's a huge heavyweight. And Blagoy likes to sit back a little bit too much. Yes, he explodes forward with those overhands and those hooks over the top. But Rothwell gives very interesting looks to his opponents before he attacks, right? Sometimes he'll move like a mummy in front of them with his hands forward. Sometimes he'll use his crazy head movement, crazy footwork out of nowhere, almost like Clay Guida. And it's just hard to get a read of what Ben Rothwell is going to do out there. But what we do know is he has enormous power, great countering ability, but his countering usually comes when he gets hit. When the opponent's able to get in on him because he's not that fast, then he finds his counter shots through that. And his chin in that case is a great weapon for him, but he doesn't want to rely on it too much. So my prediction for this fight, I'm just going to have to go with Ben Rothwell. Blagoy, he sits back way too much. Yes, he's defensively sound when he is sitting back. He doesn't really get hit too much, but he does get hit when he moves forward. And we saw that in the JDS fight as well. And JDS is not the greatest counterpuncher. And when he runs into the much bigger man in Ben Rothwell, and even if he is able to connect with some shots, he is in risk of getting dropped by any punch from Rothwell because the thing about Rothwell is he doesn't really set in a stance. Sometimes he takes the orthodox, goes southpaw, and a lot of times you see him in the parallel stance. The problem with the parallel stance is defensively getting away from punches, it isn't great. It's a lot better moving laterally from punches, but not linearly. In the heavyweight division for Rothwell, I don't think he's going to be that quick to move laterally from Ivanov's punches. But the thing is, He has power in everything he throws in that stance. And that is exactly how he's able to catch opponents with his counter shots and drop them with every hit. And that is why I think might happen in this fight. So I'm going to go with Ben Rothwell. I'm going to go by a second round TKO. Then we go to Elizeu Zaleski Dos Santos versus Curtis Millender. This is probably the hardest fight to call on the entire card by far. Such great strikers from both of them. Dos Santos definitely has the better kicks, whereas Millender definitely has the better punches. But overall, when it comes to striking ability, striking technique, minus the footwork, I would say Curtis Millender is the better striker overall because he does have really good kicks. He has a very good oblique kick and right high kick, especially behind his punches. And just like Dos Santos is really good with his flying knees, Millender is really good with flying knees, but also just countering opponents by throwing his knee up at them, which he knocked out Thiago Alves with. He caught Max Griffin a couple times with that. But when it comes to footwork and movement and angles and all that stuff, that is where Dos Santos is going to take over. His movement is so smooth. Nothing is really quick like someone like Conor McGregor or something. Nothing is really flashy or anything. His feet are always moving in the perfect positions. And there's such a fluidity to his style. They do call him capoeira for a reason. His capoeira is actually really nice, and that is probably where that flowy movement comes from. And because of that flowy movement, and you don't really understand where his feet are really placed, he is able to set up spinning kicks, left high kicks, right high kicks, side kicks, and all sort of kicks from those kind of angles. They're already set up from his movement, which makes it so hard to see them coming, like Sean Strickland for an example. Strickland came in with that left jab and also fade out to his left behind it, which is an excellent boxing technique, but because of Dos Santos' flowy movement, he was able to just naturally set up the spinning heel kick and drop Strickland, even though Strickland was moving away from it. Just the element of surprise was able to finish Sean Strickland. But there's one problem with high kicks against a guy like Curtis Millender. Millender is extremely tall. He's going to be 4 inches taller than Dos Santos, and he fights very tall. He keeps more of a Muay Thai stance and approaches things in a very much like a Muay Thai fighter. He loves to go back and forth. He doesn't move too much. He likes to sit in the center of the cage and pick opponents and find his openings through that. His combos aren't the greatest. They're not lengthened like someone like Dos Santos' combinations. And because of that, naturally the movement of Dos Santos is going to give Millender a huge problem. I do not see anybody getting finished in this fight. I think they're both just so defensively responsible for that. Millender has a good chin, and he keeps that long reach on his opponent at all times. That is going to play a factor in him not getting caught too much, but I also think Millender's plotting style is not going to be able to get to Dos Santos that well. But there is one big opening for Dos Santos against Millender. If it does get finished, I do see Dos Santos landing a body kick. Because Millender sometimes doesn't block the body. He's not too aware of body shots. Even guys like CR Bauer-Drazada, who is not proficient at kicks at all, was able to land some body kicks on Millender. And someone who's as quick and as unpredictable as Dos Santos, with the dexterity and the proficiency in his kicks, it's going to be a problem for Millender. So my prediction for this fight, man, it's tough to call. It's so tough to call. My gut feeling says Dos Santos is going to win this. But for some reason, I want to go with Millender. Because of how good his hands are compared to Dos Santos. Dos Santos does not have that good of hands. Doesn't have the best short-range attacks. He fights from a very long range. And that's just naturally going to put him at a disadvantage. But he's able to blitz in and out on Millender, which does give him openings. You know what? I'm going to go with Dos Santos. I think he's going to win a point fight and win a decision through that. And then we go to the main event. Derrick Lewis versus Junior Dos Santos. Very compelling fight, important fight for the heavyweight division. If JDS wins this fight, I mean, it puts the heavyweight division in a very weird place. And I would expect Derrick Lewis to be the favorite in this fight. Now, these two guys are strikers for the most part. Derrick Lewis for sure is not going to go for takedowns. JDS can. He has that advantage in this one. He's a better grappler, better wrestler than Derrick Lewis is. And he's a better boxer. I mean, the thing about Derrick Lewis is he's not the best technically. But he just has so much heart, so much power, and good timing in his right hand. He's able to catch opponents eventually, right? The attributes that he has puts heavyweights in danger. And that is the thing. Can he find the right hand on Junior Dos Santos? Even though JDS is a lot older now, he still has much better footwork and much better hands. And there's the thing. Derrick Lewis doesn't move much, right? He kind of just sits there and waits for you to come at him. Maybe sometimes he'll come at you, but the way JDS moves, Derrick Lewis cannot just rush one time and let JDS move around after, right? The way you have to beat JDS is you have to push him back, march forward at him, and then cut him off instantly. And you have to keep that movement active and constant until you finish him, or until you catch him, or if he's able to get away from the cage. That is what guys like Stipe Miocic is able to do to him. Cain Velasquez set that blueprint, and everybody who didn't do that to him got caught or lost besides, I think, Alistair Overeem. But Overeem is such a proficient and excellent striker. he's able to just outstrike Dos Santos, which I don't think Derrick Lewis is going to have that luxury. The only way I can see Derrick Lewis catching Dos Santos is by doing that, but that's just not natural for him. It's not in his character. But the main way I see Derrick Lewis catching Dos Santos is if Dos Santos comes in on Derrick Lewis, enters on Lewis, and Lewis is eventually able to connect with the right hand. Very similar to his fight like with Travis Brown. And 5 rounds is going to play an advantage for both of them. It gives Derrick Lewis a longer time to find the right hand, but it also gives JDS the cardio advantage. Right? He has better cardio than Derrick Lewis. He's been through 5 rounds many times. And because Lewis doesn't move too much, and because all the 5 rounds, Derrick Lewis gives JDS so many chances in this fight. Chances to move in and out. Chances to make it a point fight. Chances to catch him with his crisp boxing and exit away from the big punches. JDS also has much better kicks as well. When you allow JDS to be the aggressor and let his offense go, he has beaten every single one of those opponents. He is such a different and dangerous striker when you allow him to do so. But he's a completely different fighter when you make him back up and be defensive. His countering abilities are not that great, and he kind of panics moving back. He's a lot easier to deal with, and his movement is a lot more obvious. So my prediction for this fight, if you know about my predictions, I usually like to go with the more technical fighter, the more skilled fighter, and JDS is definitely that guy. And I also like to go with the guy who has more weapons, as well as more chances to win the fight, which is also JDS, I believe. But the X factor in Derrick Lewis's right hand and his heart is something unpredictable. I mean, who expected him to catch Volkov like that? I mean, he was losing the fight against, again, a very technical and skilled fighter who had all the skills and attributes and abilities to win that fight, but he eventually just gets caught in a 3-round fight, let alone a 5-round fight. So, you know what? I've been wrong too many times about Derrick Lewis. Every single time I picked a more skilled fighter against him and he's beaten them. Besides Daniel Cormier, of course. So I'm going to go with Derrick Lewis in this fight. He has 5 rounds to eventually find that right hand. So I can potentially see him pressuring Dos Santos back and finding the right hand after that. Or him waiting for Dos Santos to come in and he catches him with the right hand. One thing I did see in the Tai Tuivasa fight with JDS is Tuivasa was able to push him back just a little bit. And JDS went with a jab to the body. And Tuivasa caught him with the right hand over the top. That is exactly what Derrick Lewis is going to be able to do. So I do see eventually Dos Santos getting caught with the right hand. Maybe winning the fight, of course, but getting caught. So I'm going to go with Derrick Lewis. I'm going to go by a 3rd round TKO. And then let's go to the betting odds to see if there's anything interesting. Drew Dober is an underdog against Beneil Dariush. I mean, a 2-1 favorite for Dariush. I don't know about that, man. To be honest, I think I favor Drew Dober in that fight. Dariush has never been the same since his knockout to Edson Barboza. Brandon Rothwell is an underdog against Ivanov. I mean, I understand Ivanov does have an opportunity because Rothwell is coming off a layoff. But if we see the Rothwell of old, I do think he'll eventually catch Ivanov. JDS is the favorite? Okay, I thought Derrick Lewis would be the favorite, but I kind of agree with that. I mean, JDS does have more weapons, he's more skilled, he's faster. I mean, he has more opportunities to win this fight. But Derrick Lewis always finds a way, man. I mean, even Shamil, Travis Brown, Marcin Tybura, Francis Ngannou, Volkov. I mean, all these guys are much more technical than he is. Like, a lot more technical than he is. But for the most part, he catches them. And that is just something you can't overlook. I mean, if you look at all of his finishes, Volkov was in the 3rd round, Tybura was in the 3rd round, Travis Brown was in the 2nd round, Shamil was in the 4th round. He's catching these guys late in the fight. And most of these fights, he's losing until he does that. I mean, he's the underdog bettor's best friend. So, I don't know, man. Dos Santos being a 2-1 favorite, obviously, Derrick Lewis is probably the best guy to look at on the betting odds. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the predictions. And if you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe. I am working on a Nightmare Matchups right now, and it's almost done. It should be out tomorrow, if not Saturday. So, be looking for that. And again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.